asking me, Grace, how could you say Moon Knight is not a top-notch show, as you have very much enjoyed these first 2 episodes? Well, right off the bat, let me explain that to you as best I can with no spoilers for the 2 episodes coming up that I have seen and you have not. Well, first off, I felt, especially when you watch them back to back, I think this show benefits from actually being a weekly release because the first episode is so fast-paced and so well done, and it's just moving so quickly, and it's so exciting. And then, because they made the very clever, in my opinion, decision to start so late in the story, they blink, and they're like, whoa, let's back it up, let's slow down, and fill everybody in on what's going on with a tremendous amount of exposition in episode 2. And I really felt that slowdown when I watched these episodes back to back. But you had a week to go away, do other things, and so you don't feel the slowdown as much as I did. I'll also tell you that I thought episode 3 was by far the weakest, where I really started to lose my temper with this show and the lack of action. And then in 4, I told you I felt they had a twist that was introduced that I wasn't too happy about. I also feel that the relationship between Marc, Steven, and Layla is really not great, and I have some problems with it. And so that kind of affected how I feel about the show as well. That's just to give you, as best I can at this point, an explanation as to where I'm coming from. But let's break down this episode. There is some great stuff to go over. It's still very much a character study, and thankfully, Oscar Isaac is very interesting. He certainly has a very interesting performance. And I will also point out that just to show how quirky this show is and how unusual it is that they have more additional posters that have come out after the goldfish, and they have the name tag and the scarab. And it's like, why not Arthur Harrow or Layla or Khonshu? I mean, I know they're not introducing a lot of new characters as they go along like other shows do, but I still feel, I don't get the quirkiness of highlighting those objects. Maybe it'll all come together with the final 2 episodes. But I also will say that based on trending and stuff like that, I suspect this show is not doing very well. I think that the people who are tuning in seem to be enjoying it very much so far, but it's not a WandaVision, it's not a Loki, it's not even a Falcon and Winter Soldier. I'd say it's probably more along the lines of Hawkeye and Book of Boba Fett. It's not a Mandalorian, the most popular show on Disney Plus to date. So I wonder if we will see a season 2, because it's just not generating the kind of excitement that MCU content is supposed to generate. We'll see where it comes in on the Nielsen ratings in about a month or so, because they're so far behind. All right, so he starts out, he wakes up, chained to the bed, and he assumes once again that it was a dream. It was all a dream. I don't know why he keeps making that assumption. He's like, this time it was just a dream. And he looks in the mirror and he's like, are you there, buddy? Are you there? And of course, nothing. So he goes to the museum, and I love this shot that they have here. I don't think this is quite as well. This is the directing duo that comes in. This is not Mohammed Diab. I think Diab is a little bit better of a director, just like I think Jeremy Slater is a little bit better of a writer. Maybe that's why they blinked and slowed down. They got different writers in there, and they're like, hold on, let's let everybody catch up. And I'm like, no, keep going. Pedal to the metal, baby. And they're like, no. So I'm like, fine, don't be as cool as the first episode. But I did like the shot where he's walking into the museum and the camera flips over, kind of like Marc, going into like this mirror dimension. But, it's Marc versus Steven. So there's been an incident in the loo. I love the use of British slang. And Scotty, the security guard, I can't believe this museum has one security guard and a gabillion cameras. It looks like Batman in there or something. They just have Scotty watching them all. He's not even watching them. He's watching otter videos. But anyway, Steven's like, you got to watch this. Wait till you see what's on the security camera. So lo and behold, to complicate Steven's life and to save money on VFX, no one else can see what he sees. So he just looks like he's running around. Again, more running. Someone cut together, I retweeted this, a very funny, what is it? Old-timey music to Steven just running everywhere. So he's running here. And he's like, okay, no, wait, this shot will do it, this shot. and nothing. So it just looks like he's just lost his mind. So he's like, fast forward to want to come out of the bathroom, fast forward. And so it's really great because Scotty, some of the lines here are very well written, to be fair. And so he says, is that you, Scotty? And he's like, no, it's Steven. And yeah, that's me. But then when he sees this new person come out who totally clocks the security camera, he goes, that's not me. So that's great. And I love it. And it's definitely not him. And that other version of him, Marc, is upset. He's like, I hope you're happy, Steven. All right. I'd be like, well, if you know where the security cameras are, would you walk right in front of one and look right at it? I guess he knew it was too late at that point. So he has to go to Human Resources, which apparently has its own this museum, because you can see the museum logo at the bottom. They have their own health division, mental health division. But this is interesting. I think it's interesting you can't see who is on the brochure. Keep that, put a pin in that. So also you can see he's reflected in the desk. Very nice use of reflections and duality with the two lamps. I love it. And Egyptian theming. So, he makes the guy, he's like, oh, they look like good listeners. And the human resources guy, who looks a lot like a security guard, is like, hey, man, I'm on your side. And he makes him feel good. But he's like, obviously, we're not going to press charges, but we're going to fire you. And he's like, do you have any museum possessions on you? And I love it. He's like, I didn't nick anything. I didn't nick it, And then he searches his pockets just to double check. And he's reminded that he has these things of Marc's, that phone and the key. And he does have one bit of museum property, and that's his beloved name tag, and he's got to give it back over. Oh, so sad. So he's talking to Crowley. This is Crowley, basically, from the comics. And I thought this was actually pretty well done. I'm surprised Crowley's there all day. I'm like, Crowley, do you take a break ever? But he's pretty good at holding still, at least for as long as the camera needs him to. I thought that was pretty cool. And I like this, just like Wanda earlier this evening, when I was going through the new Wanda footage for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, another lone tear in the eye. It's a great acting trick. They're both very good at it. So I like that Crawley kind of breaks character there just a little bit because he gives him this big hug. You can't just pat him on the shoulder. I think you could really use it. And I feel so bad. This is like his only real friend. All right. So anyway, he's about to meet a whole bunch of people though. So don't worry. So this is a fictional security, storage place in the UK, but very cleverly, he just starts going to locations. And there's one. By the way, I've been watching some screeners for like The Flight Attendant is the most recent one I've been doing. And as you get further along and you get further ahead of when the episodes will debut, they're further behind in doing the VFX. And you'd be amazed at what's VFX. So not only am I sure that sign is added via VFX, but I love this shot, by the way, through this door. But that computer screen, that television screen, that's probably all VFX added in there. And they're just looking at if anyone's using a computer in a television show or a movie, they're just pretending. And they put the computer screen stuff in after. So I thought that was really funny and interesting. They didn't even bother to give this place a name. It's just Central London Storage. They're like, no, don't even bother coming up with a company name. It's not important. Because it's not. So this guy's like, yeah, I know you. I totally know you. Number 43. I don't know. I guess, in a world where, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is pre or post Thanos snap, but in a world with the Avengers, I'd be like, I need to see some ID. But anyway, this guy's a cool guy. So we get an introduction to the way the lights work in this very, very cool storage unit system. And so he takes him to his locker, and that has a QR code for a free comic. I couldn't get it to work, though. I wanted to get a still of how it worked, what would come up. I couldn't get my phone to register it, which was very annoying. But anyway, so if you have better luck, give it a whirl. And so he goes inside and he finds Marc Spector's apartment. Marc Foster's a famous director. Wouldn't that be funny if that was his alter ego? He was like, why did you make such a bad Bond movie? But anyway, this is Marc Spector's very militaristic apartment. So he goes in, and I love the way Oscar Isaac does this. He's so disapproving of the gun that he finds in there when he opens it up. He's like, typical of this guy. So he takes out the gun in a very Steven way, and we see he knows his alter ego's name is Marc, but now he has a last name, Marc Spector, because he has his U.S. passport. And it mentions Chicago, Illinois, which is actually where Marc Spector is from in the comic. So I appreciate that little bit of detail. So he's going through it, and he finds the scarab, which once again alerts him him that this was not a dream. So he's like, oh my God, just like Arthur Harrow really exists, so does the scarab. So he's got it in his hand. He says he realizes on his own it's a compass, that it's leading to something, but he's like, it's not pointing north, but it points. Well, actually, Marc gets his attention in the reflection in the walls there. Good thing they're nice and shiny. And he's like, they finally have a talk. They have a talk. They have a heart-to-heart. And I thought it was pretty funny where he's like, what am I, like a secret spy? And he's like, and Marc goes, it's a little more complicated than that. And he's like, more complicated than that? What am I, possessed? Is there a demon? And he says, I'm never going to go to sleep again. I don't care how bloody handsome you are. Tell me what it is you are. I thought that was funny. I'm like, that's you, Stephen. Why do you have such low self-esteem? But anyway, although self-confidence is very sexy. But anyway, Marc comes clean and he says, I'm an agent of Khonshu. And I like that Stephen's like, I eat one piece of steak and then bam, I go bonkers. I could relate to that. I think that's so funny. Like the one moment you do something that you don't, you step out of your discipline and you're like, of course, everything goes to the worst it possibly can. I thought that was very funny that he blamed it on the steak. So anyway, he's trying to decide what to do. And, you could even see Marc in the reflection in the gun. So reflections are very important. And Stephen's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this bag of illegal stuff. I'm going to go to local authorities and I'm going to have them stuff me so full of pills that I never hear from you again. And so Khonshu's like, time for me to weigh in. So they do this cool thing. This is actually done from Morbius. Morbius, I'm sure Daniel Espinosa is like, I have the same cool shot in my movie, but nobody gave me credit for it. But anyway, the motion capture lights. And so sometimes you see him, sometimes you don't. But he sees him a little. And so again, Stephen takes off running. So they have some cool shots, but you can't outrun Khonshu. And then they have this, so Khonshu turns around and they actually freeze it here themselves, which I thought was very surreal. But it's a great shot. I love it. So he running out, trips, not a great way to meet Layla. And of course, Layla pulls up on her moped and she's like, Marc, is that you? And it's Layla, and he recognizes the voice. And I have this shot because I like the shot. I think it's a nice shot. London's such a nice city. So anyway, if that's where I don't believe they actually shot London, actually. That could be, I have discovered that there are so many establishing shots and shows which are like Getty footage or another company. Like again, on Flight Attendant, so many little squares when they like show where they are to do the transition. A lot of it is stock footage. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. All right, so anyway. They're on this moped, and she's like, why are you holding my shoulders? Just hold me normally. And so this is, of course, very awkward for Stephen, who has, I don't believe, ever had a girlfriend. But he goes from a girlfriend to a wife, because she's like, I'm your wife. And I had a little bit of a problem with this. I feel like, Layla's a real person, and I think Stephen treats it like he just kind of won the lottery, like he has an instant right to this person. I mean, Stephen's nicer than that, but he should still be treating her like a stranger. I mean, he's made it very clear up until this point that he and Marc are not the same person, even though they share the same body. So he really, I understand that he's had a hard time meeting somebody, but I think this is where it gets really morally dicey for him to feel like this is his instant wife or instant girlfriend at the very least, because, hey, she's already made out with this body or, obviously done much more with it. But I just felt that I wasn't happy. I wasn't so pleased with that. Some of you might be like, whatever, man, but that's what you're doing. Marvel's just glossing over like some really uncomfortable but hard truths. So it's like a problem I have with this show. But again, they use a nice job with reflection. He's reflected in the back of her helmet. She's looking at him in a mirror because she's, of course, part of Marc's life, not his. So I think that's a cool way to introduce her, especially at the beginning. So she is very Marion Ravenwood. I saw a lot of comparisons of her to the character from Raiders of the Lost Ark, who, you'll learn. I don't want to give anything away about her character, but she's very Marion Ravenwood, even in, her styling and her coloring. So he brings her to this apartment, and that's Marc on the other side of the reflection being like, she shouldn't be here, man. We're crossing the streams, to bring in another movie reference. And Stephen's just delighted to have this lady in his apartment. But, she sees the thing on the bed, But she makes the assumption that maybe he's living here with someone else. Maybe he's leading a double life. And he's like, no, it's my mom's apartment. And she said, oh, you guys are talking again? Well, his mom's flat. But we learn a little bit more about this mysterious mom. I'm curious if we'll ever get to see her or if she'll factor in. But then this is pretty interesting. There's this book of poetry, and she takes it down because it's revealed that's her favorite poet, but Stephen thinks it's his. And so you start to wonder, like, what, because, he hasn't known Layla his whole life. So when did this division begin, and how do things bleed through? And this kind of gave me the idea that, especially because he and Layla get along so well, that what is this like? Is this like the male and female side of the brain, right? Is that how they've divided up this body, right? Marc is the more male version, and Stephen is the more feminine side, because he likes poetry, he likes learning, and Marc's the big mercenary who just settles things with his fists. But I thought that was an interest. I thought maybe that might be something they were going with. So let's keep an eye out for that. So yes, she sees that he's also studying, Egyptology, which is going to come in handy. And they bond over this a little bit, but she just cannot believe this. She's just having also a hard time. He thinks they're bonding. They are kind of bonding, but she's like, what are you doing? Who is this? What are you trying to do here? Like, she's not buying it just yet. So it turns out he'd served her with divorce papers. And then he says this other thing, which I'm like, He's like, I'd never divorce you. And I'm like, you don't know this woman. She's actually not at all married to you. So you never even married her. So you shouldn't even think that you guys getting divorced would have anything to do with you. If anything, he should be like, well, if you're divorcing Marc, maybe now you're free to date me. And we can start from the beginning like a normal relationship. But anyway, Marc's watching this whole thing, and he's like, yeah, this is bad. Because, he feels bad about the way things have gone down with Layla. So Stephen's trying to convince her. So he's like, look what's in my bag. And Marc's like, don't do it. You can see him in the mirror back there. And he's like, don't do it. You're going to get her killed. And that's what stops Stephen. But I like Layla's spunkiness. She just pushes him aside easily, and she finds the scarab. And apparently they've been looking for this. I like the line where she says, you don't remember any of our adventures together. I'm like, that sounds pretty nice. But I think that when he says, take it, you can have it, because she thinks he was trying to steal it. But when he says, no, have it, I don't care, you can take it. I think then that's for a moment when she starts to maybe feel this isn't a threat, this isn't an act just to get the scarab away from her, and she starts to believe it and soften a little bit to Stephen. And then further proving his point, where someone knocks at the door and says, we need to talk to Stephen Grant. But that could just be another one of his identities, as she said earlier. So we got the Popo here. They force their way in. Of course, they take some issue with the chains on the bed, or the chain on the bed, which I would understand. But he's like, oh, I have a sleeping disorder. And I'd be like, nah, still a problem for us as the police. So she goes to see if there's anyone out here, and Layla has escaped. And I'm like, oh, is that all CGI? I bet that's all CGI. They probably just built the window in the tiny part of the ledge. I'm all like CGI now, because I've been seeing it everywhere. All right. I also saw an interesting video behind the scenes about the VFX on No Way Home, and like how much of that was VFX is just like mind-boggling. All right, so anyway, back in the apartment, they're like, hey, the bag. And they're looking through it, and they're trying to find the scarab, but luckily Layla has taken it. But they're like, they do find a passport with a different name on it, and that's enough to take him in. And it's suddenly night for some reason. That was a very long interrogation, or they're driving very far away. And they have, again, this wasn't when they were filming, they added that in post. So anyway, here is his file, is Marc Spector. Nick Pepin is an Easter egg of somebody who is a production manager on a lot of Marvel MCU projects. But look at all those dead bodies. Ooh, why is Marc, why did someone cut his head out instead of just taking a regular picture? But anyway, that's like really bad Photoshop. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty bad. And they're like, whoa, you're a pretty bad guy. And even Steven's appalled. He's like, who is this monster inside of me? So they pull over to somewhere that is definitely not a police precinct, which looks like a very affordable location to me. So they leave him in the car, and he's trying to get out, and this girl's not going to help him because she's got the cult tattoo. And this is a chance for Marc. So he actually fights he fights Marc trying to take the body over. And Marc's like, don't fight me. And he's like, you're a monster. I saw what you did to those people. And Marc's like, there's an explanation. I'm like, of course there's always an explanation. But, and so they're having a fight, and Arthur Harrow is listening in, it's revealed, on a walkie-talkie. Because Arthur Harrow, very cleverly, wanted to find out exactly what was going on. So he lets him out and he says, oh, Stephen, I'm sorry for the ruse, but we needed to know what was going on. And he hands the walkie-talkie back to these police officers who are members of his cult. And I think it's very interesting. I really think, Ethan Hawke, even though, again, I don't think he's well cast here from a representational perspective, but he's doing an amazing job. I mean, he is just so calming. He really does. I mean, he does have that cult leader vibe to him, which is like very, hypnotic. And I think one of the things that he does is that he just believes you. And I think that a lot of lost people just want someone to believe them. Although, of course, we find out he has other reasons to believe Stephen. But he believes, everyone else is challenging the split persona, but not Arthur Harrow. He's like, hey, buddy, I get you. I'm here for you. Let's talk. So he's like, no wonder you have so much, you're so chaotic. Ahmet couldn't read you because you've got Marc's voice, Stephen's voice, Khonshu's voice inside of you. And Khonshu's talking, and I love this thing that Arthur Harrow does. So you can see him, right? And Arthur Harrow knows what's going on. Even though he can't see or hear him right now, he makes Stephen feel a little less crazy. So that, makes him seem like a port of safety. Although we're going to find out that's not the case. So Arthur's like, you don't have to listen. He's telling you to kill me right now. He's telling you to kill me, right? He's like, crush his windpipe. So Khonshu creates this disruption, and Arthur's like, that's all he can do. Don't worry. Don't let him bother you. He can't do anything besides that without your help. Let's go. So they walk along, and he has the, tomato. If you say tomato, we're going to kill you. So there's only tomatoes here. But anyway, this is this cult, and whoever, they grow food. They can't be evil, right? Come on. So he's like, this used to be a bad neighborhood. Now nobody even knocks their door. And there's Khonshu. I like the way his staff is in the streetlight, which kind of creates that like moon effect almost. It's very cool. So he takes him inside. This is where we saw him in the beginning. I cracked a joke about this when I was doing the watch along because I said Arthur Harrow has like glass slippers because of course his sandals are filled with glass. So anyway, he wants to turn into an Ahmet princess. All right. So he goes into where they're hiding. Very nice space they found, and they seems to be a utopia. Look, they don't even bother each other with the nature documentaries they're watching. They even have trays. I love that. I'm like, who whittled the trays for you guys? Why do you want to have trays? That seems crazy to me. But yeah, they have cafeteria trays. And there's Khonshu watching them. They have lentil soup because they're both vegan. So they're really bonding here. So Arthur Harrow's saying, oh, is this what he's saying now? And Stephen's like, can you hear him? And this is where Arthur Harrow reveals that in fact he was the guy. He was the avatar before, or maybe not right before Stephen, but or Marc, but he once had this deal with Khonshu. And so it puts him in it's interesting. Nobody here is really a good guy. Actually, that's true. Maybe Stephen. Stephen's the only good guy, but I wouldn't even say Marc's a good guy. So, because we'll explain that as things go on, but everybody's self-interested. Everybody's just doing what they want. Layla seems to be a good person too. Or is she? But anyway, so Arthur says, I was once the fist of vengeance. And I like when Stephen says, I'm not the fist of anything. That's the little American man living inside of me. And I thought that was an interesting commentary on Americans from how the world views us. And then I couldn't believe he ate the soup. You don't know what's in that. It could be poisoned. It could be drugged. Maybe they're all on a high in there. You don't know. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. And I would say that applies to don't eat the soup. But he does. And so Arthur tries to recruit him, and he's like, hey, Ahmet, she roots out all evil, and when she does that, we'll be living in a heaven on earth. And that's when Stephen starts to poke some holes in it. And I like this. And, it starts to become a little less friendly because they want the scarab. And on that note, Marc, who's watching all this from the bread bowl, is like, don't you give up Layla. Don't you tell him where Layla is. And I think that Arthur can sense that Stephen's having another internal conversation. And then, like a boss, Arthur Harrow's like, let me talk to Marc. I just want to talk to Marc. And, Stephen doesn't switch over, but obviously Arthur can guess that Marc can hear their conversation just as Khonshu can. So he starts talking to Marc, and he said, what did Khonshu promise you? Did he promise you this was the last thing you're going to ever have to do? Trust me, there's always one more mission. And I think that's interesting, especially with what happens at the end of the episode, because that basically turns out to be true. So Arthur Harrow is not always lying. Just like his face isn't lying right there, where he's like getting tired of this. He's like, give me the scarab. But instead of giving him the scarab, Stephen decides to say, what are you all, baby killers? That seems uncool. That's where I draw a line, doing that kind of stuff. And I think that Arthur then has a very interesting line where he says, sometimes, the only difference between medicine and poison is the dosage. And that's actually true. So again, I'm like, you're evil, but that doesn't mean you don't have interesting things to say. And then he says, consider a diseased limb. Cutting it off could be considered grotesque to some, but it saves the body. And Stephen's like, you're not going to get me to go along with this. So, the lentil soup didn't work, which I'm sure has carrots in it. So now it's time for the stick. And it's the Amet stick, which glows. It glows purple. And he's like, you see what this is? This is what Amet gave her first avatar. So I guess this is the first time Amet's been on the board. And it's like interesting to think that these Egyptian gods would be recruiting other people's avatars. But they are. I wish that they had spread out the budget for the Egyptian gods instead of spending it all on Khonshu to see him. But anyway, so he's like, you got to give me the scarab. Give me the scarab. And he just keeps repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. And Stephen actually doesn't have it, but he doesn't want to give up Layla. But he doesn't have to because Layla followed him. Does he still have his phone on him? I don't know how she followed him. And of course she brought the scarab. Who brings the scarab to the meet and greet? You should have left that somewhere else. But she brought it. And she comes in because she assumes that Marc's going to be able to put the suit on, summon the suit. So, but just hold on. First, I want to say that I love, with a lot of projects, the villain always, as soon as he sees what he wants, he tells his henchmen to go get it, or he tries to go get it. And I love that Arthur Harrow just holds his hand out, and he's like trying to compel you to give it to him. It kind of works in some ways. I think it's great. It's really, really cool. It's like, he just wills it. He read The Secret a lot. All right, so anyway, Khonshu's like, this is a mess. Fix this, Marc. But of course, Stephen's in control. And even Layla's like, come on, summon the suit. And he's like, what are you talking about? So she's like, fine, just hold the scarab. Why would she give it to him? So they go, again, now they both make a run for it. Arthur puts the cane to good use, and he opens up his own purple crack, just like Doctor Strange does. And as he's summoning something, Layla proves that she's good in a fight, which is important to know about the character. And so here we go, very cheaply done from a VFX perspective. So he opens up a hole in the floor, and out comes one of those jackals. Oh, I love it. So they run upstairs, and I liked this line where Stephen says, I'm going to die in an evil magician's man cave. I think it's more like an evil magician's storage room, quite frankly, but the joke's still funny. So she's like, you got to summon the suit. And Marc's like, come on, give me, hand over the body. Let's go. But Stephen just won't do it. And I like this moment because Layla says, you can do it, Stephen. So she realizes she needs to stop trying to get through to Marc, and she needs to deal with Stephen. And it gives him a little bit of self-confidence. And then that jackal comes in, and we get a real good look at it. I think it's an interesting choice to give it that crazy hair, right? I'm like, you need some zhuzh there, jackal. That's why he's so upset. So anyway, but Layla, I'd be like, don't feel bad. No one else can see you, because Layla can't see him. So Stephen gets thrown out the window, summon the suit, and there's Mr. Knight. This is a huge change from the comics. In the comics, Mr. Knight is his own persona. There's like 3 or 4 personas in the comics, but instead they're keeping it simple with just 2. Again, maybe the male and female side of the brain. Left and right, that's another way to go with it, if you don't want to do gender. But now they're two different looks, right? So they both have their own version of being Moon Knight. And so that's I think, a totally valid way to go with it. And I think it does simplify things. When you only have 6 episodes, you can only have so many multiple personalities. Who knows? Maybe some more will show up later down the line. So I like that Marc's like, what are we wearing, Steven? And I'm like, I agree with Steven. I think it looks good. I prefer Steven in this suit. And I know some of you like Marc better in his suit. But I'm Team Steven, Team Dapper Dan. Or Dapper Steven with the V. We'll talk about that when we get to that. So he has some Eskrima sticks. As a fan of Nightwing, I approve of those. They're very nice. They're like gold, very fancy. And, Steven really likes them. He's like, I think I look great. I think this is good. So he gets thrown through a wall. I thought that was a cool shot, actually. And he grips this, and it almost looks like he's got white leather gloves on, which is pretty cool. And he grips the bumper, and you can see that he has super strength. We'll talk a little bit more about Moon Knight's powers when Marc gets them, but I do want to talk about that. But first, I want to focus on this very cheap VFX scene where you can't see who they're fighting. You can kind of see it a little bit. Layla breaks some glass on him, so you can kind of see it, but I'm like, come on. So Steven's like, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to do it. I'm the guy. And he has this very funny little thing where he takes his jacket off and he goes, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. My name's Steven with a V. And I'm like, it does rhyme. It's charming. And he gets one good punch in. But it's not a knockout. He celebrates way too early. He jinxed it. He jinxed himself. So they have this funny line where, he gets thrown near this bus and this woman's like, do you think that guy's having a seizure? And I like that the woman behind him, who herself seems to be holding a beer, says, I think he's just a fancy drunk. I was like, that's hilarious. So he's able to stop that jackal momentarily with a car, but it's not going well. Marc knows it. Now even Steven knows it. So he agrees to hand over the body. And this is the coolest transition in all 4 episodes that I've seen. And they used it to promote the show. I don't know why they don't have more cool transitions like this in the actual show. But I love it. I think it's really cool. Look at the way his eyes are like moons. And look at the, it's just so cool. And the thing wraps around and the hood comes up. It's like by far the coolest. I just love it. I thought it never got this cool again in the 4 episodes. All right. So there's that jackal. And I like, so basically those are moonarangs in his chest and they just are an endless supply, it seems. Well, not endless, because he does seem to collect them, but he's got more than one there. So he takes out 2. Layla realizes this is her man, this is her guy, and so she's able to give him a quick, because they're on the same wavelength. They have a repartee because they worked together before. She's like, get him out of here because they're putting everybody in danger. And so Marc, a trained mercenary, knows that's the right thing to do. Superheroing 101, get away from the crowds. So he leads him up on the roofs for a moonlight chase. Of course he does. And I think there's just some pretty cool shots, a little VFX heavy. But you know what my problem with this sequence is? We have no idea what the benefit to being Moon Knight is or how his powers are differential from any other superheroes, right? It seems pretty superhero generic. Like, what is he, basically like just an Egyptian Wonder Woman? But, why does he need a special suit? Why can't he just have the powers all the time? It just seems like, on the one hand, overly complex, but yet not enough of a definition. It's just too many questions. So I think that's a big problem with this show too. I mean, watching the show, I want to know Steven, but I have no real desire to be Moon Knight. I'm not like, oh, that would be cool. I'm like, stay away from me, Khonshu. That's clearly a sucky deal. So because he doesn't even have particularly cool powers. He can't like fly he seems to be able to hover a little bit, but it doesn't seem like that great a deal to me. All right. So anyway, there's no telekinesis involved. That's my favorite superpower. So he grabs this guy, he gets the upper hand on him, and he impales him. Woo! Just on the edge for Marvel Disney Plus. That guy, but don't worry, kids. Look, it's just a ghost because he fades away, and his moonerang goes into the air, and he catches it, and then he puts it back on his chest, and he's like, yeah, and then he puts the suit away. He looks for the scarab, and of course he dropped it. He's like, oh, it was Steven. Steven's like, don't put that on me. Probably was Steven. But anyway, Layla is still around, and she couldn't find it, but she sees that this homeless man found it. And this is interesting. Arthur Harrow says, I can give you all kinds of things, buddy. I can give you food. I can give you shelter, but I'm going to need that scarab. But he reneges on the deal. He takes the scarab, and he doesn't even judge this guy. He's able to kill him without judging him. So Arthur Harrow is not telling everybody the whole deal. But I don't know why Layla hung around long enough for Arthur to see her. I'd be like, as soon as you saw that guy start to go, just assume he's dead and get out of there. So anyway, we cut back to Marc, who's now in control of the body, and Steven's in the reflection. And for the first time, Steven can now watch what's going on. And he says, this is horrible. I feel like I can't move. This is so bad. And he wants to get back in, and he tries to take back over the body, but he just can't do it. Marc's like, I'm not giving it back to you. So they have a really heated argument, and Steven's like, you're the whole reason my life is horrible. You're like a parasite, and that's harsh words. He's like, but you're ruining my life. And Marc doesn't want to give it over because he says, you're going to endanger Layla. If Layla, who do you think that this guy, if we don't keep this deal, Khonshu's going to have Layla be his next avatar. And then because I told you it was a sucky deal. We don't want this for her. So he, in a fit of rage, breaks the reflective surface so he doesn't have to talk to Steven anymore, and Steven can't see what's going on. So Khonshu's been listening the whole time, and he's like, you told me this wasn't going to be a problem, Marc. You were a dead body when I found you. You were a corpse. You'd still be a corpse if it weren't for me, which I think is a thinly veiled thread of how'd you like to be a corpse again? So Khonshu's like, we got to take care of this. You're making a mess out of this. And then Marc's like, you promised this is the last deal though, right? And then Khonshu's like, come on, don't you love working with me? And if you don't work with me, I don't think you're going to like who my next choice is. And so you're like, Khonshu's not a good guy either. So he's like, where do we go next? And then Khonshu, again, not a nice guy, says, where the hell do you think we go? And so he walks past and his robe turns into a curtain. And I'm not sure who that mirror, I mean, it's very effective with the way the show is written to move the story forward. So they go to Egypt, and we're in Egypt. And I think I would have thought this was cooler if it wasn't so clearly not Egypt. So they're in this room, and I wonder if that's a Star of David around his neck. I'm not quite sure. I can't get a good enough look at it because he's supposed to be a Jewish character, but because that doesn't look. Maybe it's Steven because he's not fully shirtless. Steven's like, I don't feel comfortable with this, but Marc's like, hey man, own it. So I guess that's what's going on. So Steven's trapped in the mirror, and they've obviously had another argument, and so Marc's not happy. He goes to the window, throws open the curtain, throws open the sash, and he's in Egypt. And he's not in Egypt because they didn't film in Egypt. So that's green screen. So I'm like, it's so green screen. I don't know. I find it a little bit frustrating. I'm like, come on, Marvel, fly to Egypt. Especially after they made such a thing about representing Egypt. I'm like, just go to Egypt and film there for Pete's sake. But anyway, now we're in Egypt. And so you'll see next week what happens there. So that's the second episode. By the way, they also released an actual recipe for the lentil soup, which I think was cute, but, I think more action scenes would have been preferred. But if you make the lentil soup, let me know what you think of it. So I prefer they sold lentil soup instead of asking me to make it. So anyway, lentil soup coming soon to Avengers Campus, although I would probably get it at Avengers Campus because, it's not bad to have a healthy lunch. So what did you think? What do you think of the show? There's only 4 more episodes left. And what did you think of some of the big reveals here? Thank you for going over it with me. Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.